The marble lobby gleamed beneath chandeliers that cost more than most people's yearly salary. Yet the woman standing at the front desk did not even look up when the dark-skinned stranger walked in. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed, dismissive, the kind used for people who did not belong. The man's tailored suit, his calm confidence, did not matter. To her, he was just another intruder in a place reserved for power. When she told him to get lost, he simply stared at her, silent. Minutes later, the building would tremble with consequences no one could have imagined. If this moment already has you wondering what happens next, you will not believe how this story unfolds. Subscribe now to Racism Untold Stories for more true-to-life stories that expose injustice, awaken empathy, and reveal hidden truths the world often ignores. The morning sun painted the city skyline in gold, reflecting off towers of glass and ambition. In the heart of that glittering jungle stood the headquarters of Vanguard Enterprises, a name synonymous with wealth, influence, and exclusivity. Its entrance, a cascade of marble steps leading into a cathedral of glass, was designed to make visitors feel small before they even entered. Inside, power had a scent, expensive perfume, fresh polish, and the faint trace of arrogance. Evelyn Hart, the receptionist, adjusted her blazer as she settled behind the grand mahogany desk. She liked her seat of command, right between the doors of access and denial. From there, she controlled who entered, who waited, and who was quietly dismissed. It was not written in her job description, but she took pride in it. To her, appearances were everything. People who belonged looked a certain way. Those who did not, she believed, could be spotted a mile away. That morning, she was reviewing her reflection in her compact mirror when the doors opened. A man stepped in, tall, composed, carrying an aura that did not seek attention, but quietly commanded it. His suit was impeccable, his shoes shone with quiet polish, and a leather briefcase hung by his side. His dark skin contrasted with the marble-white interior, and for Evelyn, that was the first red flag. He did not rush. His gaze moved across the lobby, calm and observant, before resting briefly on her. Evelyn frowned slightly. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at things, as if he was assessing, not admiring. She closed her mirror and straightened her posture, ready to play her role. He walked closer. Each step echoed softly against the marble. To Evelyn, it was too confident. She disliked confidence that did not come from familiarity. Confidence that came from self-assurance, not status. "Good morning?" he said quietly, but his tone carried authority. Evelyn's response was polite but cold. She glanced over him, searching for a name badge, a visitor pass, any mark of validation. She saw none. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice stiff, rehearsed. He gave his name, Marcus Ellison. He said he was here for a scheduled meeting with the board of directors. The name did not ring a bell. She looked at the appointment log on her screen and found no entry under Ellison. Her brow tightened. "I do not see that name on the list," she said. "You might be in the wrong building." Marcus remained calm. "I believe this is the right one," he said. His tone was patient, not defensive. That irritated her even more. She had dealt with all kinds of people who came pretending to be important. In her mind, he was another one of them, someone who had wandered into a world that was not his. She smiled, but the smile was hollow. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private facility." The words, private facility, always gave her a sense of power. They drew invisible lines between who belonged and who did not. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering something. He did not argue. He simply stood there, watching her for a moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit. To Evelyn, it was a victory. Small, satisfying, unspoken. She returned to her computer, logging another quiet success in her day. But across the city, In a towering penthouse office overlooking the skyline, the board of directors of Vanguard Enterprises awaited someone very important. Their meeting had been scheduled for weeks, a confidential session with the newly appointed CEO of Ellison Holdings, a powerful conglomerate that had just purchased controlling shares in Vanguard. The deal had made news across the business world, though few had yet seen the face of the mysterious new majority owner. That face had just been told to get lost. Marcus exited the building and stood on the steps for a moment, breathing in the cold morning air. He was not angry. He was disappointed, not by the insult itself, but by how ordinary it felt. He had seen this pattern so many times before, in boardrooms, at airports, in restaurants. The judgment always came first. Curiosity never followed. He glanced back at the glass doors where his reflection lingered, dark against the white interior. He knew what that reflection meant to people like Evelyn. It meant doubt, discomfort, and assumption. He had built his empire fighting those perceptions one silent moment at a time. Today, however, he would not fight. He would allow the moment to reveal itself. Inside, Evelyn resumed her routine, unaware that her decision was about to echo far beyond her desk. Her colleagues chatted behind her, trading gossip and laughter. She joined in, proud of her firm handling of an unregistered visitor. The janitor, an older man named Henry, overheard her. He looked up briefly, eyes thoughtful. Henry had seen Marcus before. Not here, but on a business magazine cover months earlier. He said nothing. Some truths did not need immediate correction. Time would speak louder. Upstairs, the board grew impatient. Calls began. Emails flew through encrypted channels. A black car was sent to the entrance, and moments later a young executive rushed into the lobby, face pale. "Has a Mr. Ellison arrived?" he asked breathlessly. Evelyn blinked. The name sounded familiar, but she could not immediately place it. "No, he has not checked in," she replied. The executive froze, his expression draining of color. "What did he look like?" he asked. She described him, tall, dark-skinned, wearing a suit. The executive's eyes widened in horror. "That was him!" he said sharply. "That was Mr. Marcus Ellison, the new majority owner of Vanguard." The sound of silence that followed was heavier than any reprimand. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Her hand trembled slightly on the desk. The laughter from earlier faded into a void of realization. Outside, the black car had stopped beside Marcus. The driver opened the door with visible urgency. As Marcus entered the car, the building behind him seemed to shrink in importance. He gave one last glance at the glass facade, calm and unreadable. He did not need to speak. The message would travel on its own. Inside the car, his phone buzzed with apologies from the board members. He responded with measured grace, professionalism sharpened by experience. He had learned long ago that power did not need volume. It only needed presence. Back inside the lobby, Evelyn's heart pounded. The executives were whispering, glancing at her with a mixture of disbelief and quiet judgment. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the magnitude of what had just happened. She had dismissed the owner of the company she worked for. Not out of ignorance, but out of prejudice disguised as professionalism. The scent of polished marble now felt suffocating. The grandeur she once admired turned cold, distant, accusatory. She realized that her greatest mistake was not in the words she had spoken, but in the assumptions behind them. Marcus's silence had not been surrender. It had been mercy. And soon, everyone in that building would learn what mercy could turn into when truth finally spoke through power. The city skyline glittered like a crown of light as Marcus's car pulled away from the building. The streets moved beneath him like rivers of routine, but his mind was elsewhere, suspended in a quiet storm of thought. He had spent years building his empire on discipline, composure, and patience. Yet beneath that calm exterior, there pulsed a memory of struggle, of the thousand small humiliations that had shaped him into the man he had become. Marcus Ellison had risen from the ashes of a world that once told him he would never belong. Born in a small, forgotten neighborhood where opportunity was a rumor, he had learned early that success would demand more than intelligence. It required endurance, the kind that came from being underestimated again and again until one learned to turn insult into armor. He had mastered the art of silence, the strength of composure, and the unshakable calm of a man who knew exactly who he was. Yet as the car glided through the city, the image of the receptionist lingered. Her tone, her eyes, her dismissal. It was not new, but it was telling. She had not seen a businessman. She had seen a stereotype. She had not recognized power. She had recognized what her world had taught her to reject. Marcus was not angry. He was weary of how little the world had changed beneath its polished surfaces. In the upper floors of Vanguard Enterprises, panic was spreading like wildfire. The news had reached every office, every executive suite. Evelyn sat frozen at her desk, pale and trembling. The young executive who had rushed into the lobby had returned upstairs to report the disaster. Every whisper that followed carried her name. Inside the boardroom, 12 men and women sat in uneasy silence as the elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out. The room stilled. His presence was not loud, yet it commanded attention, the way thunder commands silence before it strikes. He did not look at anyone in particular. He moved to the head of the table, his steps measured, his gaze steady. The chairman rose immediately, offering apologies that sounded rehearsed. Marcus raised a hand gently, and the man's words faltered. "There is no need for apology," Marcus said, his voice even, his eyes unreadable. "The truth reveals itself through behavior, not through words. Let us begin." The meeting proceeded, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every board member spoke with careful precision, aware that the balance of power in the room had permanently changed. Marcus listened to their proposals, their justifications, their numbers. He made notes silently, occasionally asking questions that cut through pretension like a blade. Yet beneath his professional exterior, something deeper was taking shape. A decision, quiet and deliberate. When the meeting concluded, Marcus thanked everyone and stood. "You have all done well," he said calmly. "But I believe the company's strength depends not only on its balance sheets but also on its values. I will be reviewing both." The statement hung in the air like a quiet warning. He left the boardroom without another word. Downstairs, Evelyn waited in dread. She had not been called yet, but the silence felt heavier with every passing minute. She replayed the scene in her mind, searching for a version where she could undo her words. But there was none. Each minute dragged her deeper into regret. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus appeared once again. The executives who had been whispering near the lobby immediately straightened. Evelyn looked up, her breath catching. He walked past her desk without looking at her. Then he stopped. The pause felt endless. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since that morning. His expression was calm, but the silence carried a weight that words could not bear. Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Marcus gave a small nod, not of forgiveness, not of anger, but of acknowledgement. Then he walked out the door. She exhaled shakily, her hands trembling on the desk. That single look had spoken louder than any reprimand. It told her he had seen everything, her prejudice, her power, her fear, and it told her something else. Consequences were coming. The following day, the office buzzed with speculation. Memos circulated about new audits, management reviews, and changes in leadership. Marcus had quietly begun a restructuring of Vanguard Enterprises, not to punish, but to cleanse. Departments were being evaluated not by profit alone, but by culture, ethics, and inclusion. He visited each floor, observing the people, their interactions, their unspoken hierarchies. Many greeted him with polite deference. Others, uncertain of how to behave, stumbled over courtesy. But a few, the overlooked janitors, assistants, and clerks, met his gaze with genuine warmth. They recognized something in him that went beyond wealth. In the cafeteria, he noticed Henry, the janitor who had recognized him that morning. Henry paused in his work and gave a respectful nod. Marcus returned it with a quiet smile. Two men from very different paths, yet bound by an unspoken understanding. They both knew the cost of being unseen. As the week unfolded, Marcus's influence rippled through the company. Rumors spread that he was preparing to make an announcement that would redefine the company's future. Executives speculated nervously, unsure whether their positions would survive the changes. Evelyn, meanwhile, came to work each day with a sinking feeling that never lifted. She avoided conversation, kept her head down, and carried the invisible weight of her mistake like a shadow. But Marcus's silence toward her was deliberate. He did not seek vengeance. He sought transformation. By Friday, a message was sent across all departments. A mandatory company-wide meeting would be held in the Grand Conference Hall at noon. No details were given. The staff whispered theories: a merger, layoffs, new leadership. None imagined what was truly coming. When the hour arrived, the hall filled with employees, hundreds of them, from top executives to janitors. Cameras were set up, lights adjusted. Then Marcus entered, the room falling into a hush. He stood on the stage, poised, composed, yet his presence carried the weight of truth. The air seemed to tighten with anticipation. He began to speak. He spoke of progress, of values, of the unseen barriers that still shaped behavior within walls of success. He did not mention Evelyn by name, nor did he recount the incident. But his words painted it clearly enough for those who knew. True leadership, he said, is not proven by how we treat those above us, but by how we treat those we believe to be beneath us. A company that measures worth by appearance is already bankrupt in its soul. The hall remained silent, every word pressing against the room's stillness. Evelyn stood at the back, her eyes wet. She felt each sentence pierce through the layers of her pride, each phrase uncovering a truth she had ignored all her life. Marcus concluded his speech with a promise: a new direction for Vanguard Enterprises. Diversity, equity, and inclusion would not be slogans, but foundations. Every department would be rebuilt to reflect them. Those who led with prejudice would no longer lead at all. The room erupted in applause, but Evelyn could not move. The sound felt distant, like thunder in another world. She knew he had not humiliated her, he had elevated the truth. And that truth would echo far beyond the walls of the company, a reminder that power could expose, but it could also enlighten. The afternoon light filtered through the glass walls of Vanguard Enterprises, turning the marble floors into rivers of gold. Yet beneath that beauty ran an undercurrent of tension. The announcement Marcus had made echoed through every corridor, every whispered conversation, every silent glance. Change was coming, and everyone knew it. Evelyn sat at her desk, the same one where her downfall had begun. The once comforting rhythm of the lobby had become a symphony of nerves. Executives walked briskly, eyes downcast, whispering in corners. Assistants typed in haste, uncertain of what the new order would bring. The air felt charged, as though the building itself waited to exhale. The grand conference that day had ended, but its aftershocks had only begun. Marcus had retreated to the top floor, where his new office overlooked the entire city. It was a panoramic view of triumph, but he stood there not as a conqueror, but as a man reflecting on the cost of his victory. The skyline glittered beneath him, the same skyline that had once seemed unreachable. Now it lay before him, beautiful, fragile, and tainted by the same invisible bias he had spent his life confronting. He thought of his mother, a school teacher who had raised him with stern kindness and endless faith. She had once told him, "One day, the world will try to shrink you. Let your dignity be the space it cannot take." Those words had become his compass, but dignity was not silence, and today it demanded action. Marcus turned from the window and sat at his desk. In front of him lay files, thick folders of internal reports, employee evaluations, and disciplinary records. He read through them with surgical precision. The deeper he looked, the more he saw patterns, unspoken hierarchies, silent biases, and decisions that had quietly excluded the very people whose work kept the company alive. Promotions denied without reason, complaints dismissed without review, pay gaps that spoke of invisible walls. This was not just one receptionist's prejudice. It was a system that had learned to disguise discrimination beneath professionalism. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of it all pressing into him. His hand rested on the armrest, steady but tense. Change was never simple, and it would never be painless. But this moment, this company, would either evolve or collapse under the weight of its hypocrisy. He pressed the intercom. "Call a meeting with the senior leadership team," he said quietly. "This afternoon." Within the hour, the top executives filled the boardroom. Some arrived eager, others nervous, all aware that something irreversible was about to unfold. Marcus entered last. His calm presence silenced the room. He took his seat at the head of the long table, the city stretching behind him like a silent witness. "Today," he began, "we decide what kind of company Vanguard Enterprises will be remembered as." He paused, letting the sentence hang. For years, this company has thrived on the illusion of excellence, an image built on power, profit, and prestige. But beneath that image lies a truth we can no longer ignore. He opened one of the folders and began to read, his voice even but cutting. He recited examples of discrimination buried in polite language, emails, memos, evaluations written with coded bias. He revealed the names of those overlooked, the departments where diversity was an empty checkbox, the patterns that had gone unseen because no one had wanted to see them. The executives shifted uneasily. The air grew heavy. Some lowered their eyes. Others clenched their hands. "This," Marcus said, lifting a page, "is what happens when perception replaces principle. When we forget that talent and worth are not measured by complexion, accent, or familiarity." No one spoke. The silence in the room was absolute. He continued, "I did not come here to dismantle this company. I came to rebuild it, stronger, fairer, and more human than before. But that cannot happen until we face what we have allowed to grow beneath our success." He closed the folder. "Effective immediately, all hiring and promotion protocols will be reviewed and rewritten. Every leader will undergo ethics and inclusion training, and every department head will be held accountable, personally, for maintaining fairness and integrity." The words struck like a gavel. Then, slowly, he turned toward Evelyn. She had been called to the meeting unexpectedly, seated near the far end of the table. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. Marcus regarded her for a long moment, not as a villain, but as a mirror of the problem itself. "And as for what happened in the lobby," he said, his tone calm but resolute, "it will not be buried under apologies or excuses. It will stand as a reminder." He gestured toward her. "Ms. Hart will not be dismissed. Instead, she will join the new department for corporate ethics and sensitivity training. She will help rebuild the very system that failed her understanding. Let this be a beginning, not an ending." The decision stunned the room. Some looked confused, others relieved. Evelyn, overcome with emotion, could barely breathe. She had expected punishment. Instead, she received responsibility, a second chance, heavier than guilt. Marcus continued, his voice steady. "Accountability without compassion breeds fear. Compassion without accountability breeds complacency. We will have both. He stood, his presence commanding, his conviction unmistakable. We cannot change the world's past, but we can decide what kind of future we build from its ruins. The meeting ended in silence. No applause, no congratulations, only the weight of realization. As the executives filed out, Evelyn remained seated, tears blurring her vision. She watched Marcus leave, his figure framed by the city's light. She felt small, but not powerless. For the first time, she understood that humility could be strength, and awareness could be redemption. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that something extraordinary had occurred within those walls. A single act of prejudice had unraveled into transformation. Marcus returned to his office and stood once more before the window. The sun was setting now, its glow washing the skyline in amber fire. He thought of the receptionist, of the board, of every nameless worker who had been told they were invisible. Today, the company had seen itself for what it was, flawed, but capable of change. He placed a hand against the glass, feeling the warmth of the light. He did not smile, but his eyes softened. Justice, he knew, was not always loud. Sometimes it arrived quietly, through grace that demanded reflection instead of revenge. As darkness began to fold over the city, Marcus turned away from the window. Tomorrow would bring headlines, meetings, and endless questions. But tonight, there was peace, the kind that came only after truth had been spoken. And in the lobby below, Evelyn remained long after closing hours, staring at the doors where it had all begun. The reflection she once admired in the polished marble was gone. What she saw instead was clarity, painful, humbling, and real. For the first time, she understood that her greatest mistake had not been in what she said, but in what she refused to see. And that realization would follow her forever, not as shame, but as a silent vow to never look away again. Days turned into weeks, yet the echo of that day at Vanguard Enterprises did not fade. The building that once radiated quiet arrogance now carried a different kind of energy, one of reflection, discomfort, and gradual awakening. Change had begun to take root, and though it was slow and uneven, it was real. Marcus Ellison became both a symbol and a mystery within the company. He did not seek praise, nor did he engage in public displays of authority. His leadership was deliberate, silent, and transformative. Every decision, every new policy, was guided by principle rather than profit. The company's reputation began to shift, not through advertising or press releases, but through action. Meetings that once excluded voices of color now began with their inclusion. Committees were formed to investigate hiring biases, pay disparities, and cultural barriers. Marcus attended these meetings personally, not as a distant executive, but as a listener. His presence alone demanded honesty. Under his direction, those who had previously felt invisible began to speak with confidence. For the first time, their perspectives mattered. The walls of Vanguard began to feel less cold. The sterile whiteness of marble and glass softened beneath the hum of collaboration. Even Evelyn noticed the difference. Her mornings no longer began with a mirror and practiced smile. They began with humility and awareness, small acts of service, quiet apologies expressed through action rather than words. She spent her days in the new department Marcus had created, the Office of Corporate Ethics and Inclusion. There, she listened to employees who shared stories of bias, discrimination, and exclusion. She documented their experiences, sometimes with tears in her eyes. For every story she heard, she found a piece of herself reflected in it. The ignorance, the assumptions, the blindness she had once carried so easily. At first, her colleagues regarded her with quiet skepticism. Some whispered that she was only there because of guilt, but Evelyn did not defend herself. She allowed her work to speak for her. Day by day, her efforts became genuine. She began to understand that true redemption was not about forgiveness from others, but a lifelong commitment to see differently. Marcus watched her progress from a distance. He never mentioned the incident again. He believed that people learned most profoundly through silence, the kind that forced them to listen inward. Outside the company, word of Vanguard's transformation began to spread. Business journals wrote about its new policies, highlighting its sudden rise in employee satisfaction and retention. Investors noticed the shift too. What had begun as a personal act of justice evolved into a corporate model for ethical reform. Yet for Marcus, the impact ran deeper than numbers or recognition. It was personal. Each step forward was a quiet tribute to every moment in his past when someone had told him he was less than what he was. Every barrier he broke, every system he changed, honored those whose voices had been silenced before his. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Marcus walked through the lobby where it had all begun. The night staff nodded respectfully as he passed. The air was still, the marble glinting under soft lights. He paused at the front desk, the same place where Evelyn had once told him to leave. The irony was no longer bitter, it was poetic. Evelyn was not there that night. Her shift ended earlier, but her nameplate remained on the desk. Marcus looked at it quietly, then at the doors beyond, glass panels reflecting his image back at him. The same reflection that had once been dismissed now stood as the heart of an empire rebuilt through truth. He thought of how easily moments of injustice were born, not through hatred, but through habit, and how those moments, when faced with courage and grace, could become turning points not just for individuals, but for entire institutions. The next morning, an email circulated throughout Vanguard Enterprises. It was from Marcus. It read, "Change is not a single event. It is a continuous act of courage. Let us build a company where dignity is not requested, but respected by default." The message spread beyond Vanguard. It was shared online, quoted in articles, discussed in business schools. It became a quiet movement, a call for introspection within boardrooms and beyond. Evelyn read the message several times before forwarding it to her team. She added a single line at the end, "He gave me a second chance. Let us give others their first." In the months that followed, Vanguard Enterprises transformed into more than a business. It became a story, one retold in conferences, documentaries, and classrooms. People spoke of the anonymous receptionist and the powerful CEO who had turned humiliation into enlightenment. Few knew their names, but the moral was clear. Justice did not need to shout to be heard. Marcus never corrected those who embellished the story. He knew that legends had their own purpose, to teach through symbolism what facts could not. For Evelyn, the transformation was lifelong. She began to volunteer outside of work, mentoring young people from underprivileged communities, helping them prepare for interviews and careers in corporate spaces. Each time she looked into their eyes, she saw the world differently, no longer divided by class, race, or appearance, but by empathy and ignorance. She vowed to remain on the right side of that divide. Years later, during an employee recognition event, Marcus stood before the staff once more. His hair had begun to silver at the edges, but his presence remained unchanged, strong, composed, unwavering. He spoke briefly, as he always did, his words spare but weighty. "Greatness," he said, "is not measured by what we build, but by how we lift others while building it." The room erupted in applause. Among those clapping, Evelyn's hands shook slightly, tears forming as she realized how far she had come from the woman she once was. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant promises. The world was far from perfect, but within those walls, a quiet revolution had taken place, one built not on anger, but on awakening. And as the applause faded, one truth lingered in the air like a whisper. Sometimes the ones we dismiss are the ones who come to change everything. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, question, or feel something real, then join us on Racism Untold Stories. Every week, we reveal powerful, true-to-life stories about injustice, redemption, and human transformation. Subscribe now, share this story, and help keep these lessons alive, because sometimes one story can change the way we see the world.